Hello, folks. Another episode of Burning Platform. Two very good friends, Jason Corsello and Thomas Otter with Acadian Ventures. Thomas is present. Both of them have actually been guests on the series, but this time they're going to present on the fund. Investments they've been making and general trends we're seeing, particularly around. Thomas is so global investments, globalization, localization around the world, and also that silly topic called generative AI. So we'll talk about LLMs and GPUs, and no, we won't. I won't steal that thunder. But guys, welcome. Always a pleasure to have you.
It's lovely to see you, Vinnie.
Good to see you, Vin.
And Thomas, you want to kick it off with a few slides?
Yeah, we're gonna do the slide thing. Yeah. That working for you, good gentlemen? You can see that?
All right, we can see that.
Good. So, like all good VC funds, we're named after a national park or a geographic feature. And Acadian is a beautiful national park in northeastern United States, and that's where Jason's got a long history with that park. We won't go into all the details, but it's a very important national park.
I can share some details. Margaret and I were there last summer. Beautiful park.
Oh. So
Beautiful
Jason,
place.
quickly the Acadian, the name, where does it come from? Come on, give us a story.
Well, I would spend a lot of time with family up there, and the one thing I love about Acadian, which kind of translates into venture, it's a bit of a bartering society. The first time I was there, we went down to the local store, and it was trading coffee for lobsters with my wife's family that lives up there. So it's very entrepreneurial. Just a different type of entrepreneur. You're talking about lobstermen versus the entrepreneurs that we work with that are thinking about the next generation of something cool and technology related, but a beautiful place and a cool place.
Cool. So we're gonna talk today, not about national parks, although we could do that. I think being South African, I think we win on the national park thing though. We have lions and stuff,
Oh, those are fighting words.
Yeah. But anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about fund, and we talk about what's going on in our world. Jason and I both have a long sort of background in HR tech. I was at SAP for quite a long time, then Gartner, then back when SAP acquired SuccessFactors, and Jason had a significantly long innings at Cornerstone, and was also an analyst for a while. So we go back a long time, and in 2019, Jason kicked the fund off, and I was an early investor in the first fund, and then we decided about 2 years ago to get together, and we've recently raised our second fund, we invest in early stage HR tech companies or future of work companies around the world, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we see, what our investment thesis is, and how we think about the space, and talk about some of the trends and whatever that we're seeing. Remember, our world is very different from the enterprise established software company world where we originally came from. We're really dealing with companies at their earliest stage of evolution. So it's quite a different world, I think, from the typical large enterprise space that you've been dealing with. But there's a disclaimer. You're all going to read that, but it's done. So when I talk about a fund, we think about it in six terms. We're quite unusual as a VC in that we're very specialized. A lot of venture capitalists take a broad brush about investing. We don't. We focus on the space which we know, which is the future of work or HR tech. Our first fund has performed really well. It's in the top decile fund. Many of the people that invest in our funds are people from the industry. So many people are from software vendors or have had a long history in software. So that gives us a lot of insight from that community. And our anchor investor is the investment arm of ServiceNow, which is called ServiceNow Ventures. Like I said, Jason and I have got a long background in the space. Jason spends far too much time in spreadsheets and in databases and in modeling tools actually modeling out the data about the industry, and he can talk for ages about real data in the industry, which again is often unusual. The other factor that makes us unusual is that we have a global focus. So we'll typically do about 50% of our investments in North America, about 35%, 40% of our investments in Europe, and the remaining investments in emerging markets. And I'll talk a little bit about that. I think we have investments today. I think it's 13 countries, right, Jason? We said earlier today.
13 countries, you got it.
Yeah, we got investments in 13 countries.
Yeah, and then let me add a couple of things here. One is when we say data-driven, I mean, we're seed stage investors. So when you're seed stage investors, it's a bit of art and science. Right. We try to, blend the art of, is this company or these founders something unique? Is there some special ingredient about them that they're going to be outlier CEOs, right? The second part of that is trying to understand market data, like where are the trends in the market, where investment dollars going, what are trends in technology? Obviously, we're in a huge transformational shift of technology right now. So we look at data, more industry related on where are the trends in the market going, and the Wayne Gretzky, skate to where the puck's going. That's where a lot of the data that we look at is focused on. And one thing, if we roll back of when we started the fund 5 years ago, it was really predicated off of something very simple, in that, I would talk to founders all the time, and I'd always get the question of, who are the VCs that know this market? And every time I got that question, I'd scratch my head and I'd say, man, I can't think of a firm or an individual. And that's not to say there aren't great VCs in the Valley and elsewhere. But the aha moment for me, and this just as well as anyone, is in the world that we live, it is very complex, right? To do global payroll, to think about compliance, of hiring employees anywhere in the world. There's a lot of complexity. And Thomas and I have learned this just by being operators in this market, for decades now. And so I just thought there was this interesting opportunity to say, hey, let's create something specialized where entrepreneurs want to come to us because we have that knowledge of market, and VCs want to co-invest with us because we do something different from them, right? A lot of them are more generalist investors. We bring them a specialized view to the market. And could we build something interesting? And, 5 years is a short period of time in venture capital, but I think what we've proved out is that a specialized firm can actually be unique and different and build outlier returns. At the end of the day, our goal is to return a lot more capital to our investors, and we think our strategy can do that.
I would, Jason, I would say definitely functionally you are very, very unique. I mean, I can't think of too many supply chain VC focused VCs or procurement focused VCs, or even vertical VCs, right? So that's definitely unique. And then more and more, the fact that you're investing globally is, to me, a huge differentiator. Huge. I mean, I look at software vendors who've been around for 30, 40 years, barely in 6 or 7 countries, so you guys are doing well.
Thanks, Vinnie. So, we are interested in, at the moment, we're super interested in this work. So we're battling a little bit of moments with some terminology here, but we're centering around this word of work, right? Because, that's, if you think about HR, its purpose is to make the workplace more effective. We really, really are interested in the ways that work is being disrupted and the way work is being transformed. But it's at that place of disruption, or that place of transformation, where new companies, new ideas, new ways of working, and new exciting companies and new exciting categories will emerge. So, we see this. We're in a process. Every generation talks about a shift or whatever, but we are in some sort of shift at the moment. You mentioned SaaS earlier. We've had 20. It's easy to forget it, but we've had 20 years of SaaS, right? So for 20 years we've had software as a service, and 20 years ago it was completely revolutionary, and was, we were debating with, I don't know, what was the name, Nicholas Carr, about IT doesn't matter. I mean, we're going through all these debates about, what is software as a service? Is it the software? Is it the cloud, or whatever? And we've established pretty clearly now what software as a service is. So we're at the point now where there's going to be some other form of revolution, some other form of change, and we think part of that is going to be a big participant in that change is going to be driven by AI, but it's going to be driven by AI and also reactions to AI and broader trends and demographics in society. So one of the things that's fascinating for us in HR tech is that there are fewer people that go to work. Right. So the demographics, even in many emerging market countries, is that there are fewer people of working age. So we want to improve, we want to build more stuff, we want to have more, want to have better standard of living, we want to have better this, we want to have better cars, better houses, better. But there are fewer people to actually build and deliver those services. So that starts to put a tremendous pressure on HR. And that puts pressure on recruitment, it puts pressure on reskilling, it puts pressure on learning, it puts pressure on development in the ways we work, in the countries we work from. And all these things come together, combined with the interesting dynamics that AI is and other technologies are creating. But it creates a cauldron of ferment that we think is super exciting, and it's complicated. And because it's complicated, it requires specialist expertise, and that's what we believe differentiates us and drives what we do.
Thomas, the demographic issue that you talk about, I don't think the light bulb has gone on in too many HR groups, because it tends to be at a country level. They tend to be or at a regional or even a company level, right? But this is a significant factor when you look at global markets. I mean, who would have thought?
I mean, it's a big deal where I am at the moment in Germany. It's a big deal at the moment because restaurants, and some restaurants are closing because they can't get people, and it's a real issue in healthcare, for instance, in terms of caring for working in care homes and all that kind of stuff. There's just not people around, and so on the one hand, we've got the promise of automation, which some jobs may well be automated, and there's lots of debates about the levels of automation and so on, which we could probably talk about for all day. But the simple demographics is that there are fewer people of working age to do the work that we need to be done. So that creates competition, that creates all kinds of opportunities.
That's not to say that there's not an overabundance of workers, right? I mean, for many years, both Thomas and I struggled with what's a simple way to describe our thesis. And it really came down to a very simple statement that we kind of locked in on, which is there's 3.3 billion workers in the world. When people talk about TAM, it's a pretty big TAM in terms of the opportunity of selling, deploying and selling technology. But there's 3.3 billion workers in the world. And the fact of the matter is a majority of them don't love their job. A majority of them are underpaid, and nearly all of them are fairly unloyal to their employer, right? The average Gen Z or millennial stays like 2.5 years now in the US at least. So it's a broken workforce today. And if you look at the enterprises, they spend on average $1,500 on technologies and tools to help make their workers more efficient, more productive, and better. So, I mean, that's the simplest way to think about it. The way I like to describe our thesis is this is it's a very huge market that's very broken. And we think that technology can be an equalizer in a lot of making work better for the workers. Yep. And in doing so, making the workforces way more efficient and ultimately way more profitable. It's a pretty simple equation.
Yeah.
And that's a great point. And, given your global outlook too, Asia's seen it much quicker than anybody else. Japan saw it a decade ago. I'm shocked to see China, because of the one-child policy, the unintended consequences. They're running out of younger workers, and that is the manufacturing powerhouse of the world. We're going to have to face up to that. So
I mean, the Minister of Business in Germany stood up, I think yesterday or the day before, in Parliament and made a big speech about the workforce, about the need to revise immigration policies and make it easier for people to come to Germany to work here. It's big changes based on the back of that.
Just as a comment, just to finish that global point of view, the U.S. has always managed to keep its workforce somewhat young because we allow immigration. I don't know if you do it smartly, but we seem to be able to, at least in some sectors, you'll always have young workers. Question though, Jason, as you mentioned, do they want to work? I mean, that's really the big question.
I had this debate with my nephew the other day that's turning 18, and he seemingly doesn't want to work, doesn't think he needs to work. And I was like, man, when I was 14 years old, I was delivering newspapers on my bicycle at 4:30 in the morning. Right, I was mowing lawns in the afternoon, making $5 per lawn.
Yeah.
Right,
and I was like Monty Python said, I was living in a shoebox on the motorway. Yeah.
We've lost that, and we somehow need to figure out a way to get it back.
Yeah.
Well, we all do, and when you talk about the future of work, we've also got to bring back pride in work, right? I mean, I like to tell young people, if you look at your last name, most last names can, derive from professions, centuries of history of work. So
My
we can be
ancestors
proud.
were probably otter hunters. That's probably what they were.
But us older people need to bring back pride in work too. So, anyways, sorry,
Yeah.
didn't mean to be distracted.
No, it's yeah. And so, I mean, I think the slide kind of summarizes what we do, but and let me move on. But we really are focused on this whole, work is what, how work gets done and doesn't get done, and could be better, and could be more exciting, and could be more fun, and could be more profitable, is what keeps us awake and what keeps us excited. Yeah. And you'll know a bunch of these people, but we got a bunch of people from the industry that we work with. It's not just us, but we have a great network we can call of, and we find this is super helpful for the portfolio companies. Once we've made an investment in the company, then we link them up often with expertise from around the world to assist. And so if I pick out about the portfolio companies, about the distribution, I think we're on the way to being a global fund, but we're not a global fund. There are over 200 countries in the world, so there's plenty more places we could be investing in. There's plenty more opportunities. We think that talent is distributed equally and opportunity isn't. So we're always on the lookout for smart, smart innovations. I'm looking at a company tomorrow that's based in Portugal, and I have a call early next week with some companies out of Vietnam. So we're super interested in exploring innovation pretty much anywhere. And maybe to give an example of that, I'll talk about one, and I decided to wear their shirt today. I don't know whether you guys can see it. But, it's a company called WorkPay, which is out of Kenya. And what's fascinating is that some of the several economies in Africa are performing well. Businesses are growing in these countries. The standard of technology is often far better than you imagine. So mobile phone commerce is far more advanced in Kenya than pretty much anywhere else in the world, unbelievably, but it's true. 75% of the GDP flows through a mobile app in Kenya. And all these countries like Kenya, Ghana, etc., are going through significant digitalization. So what's happening is that not only are businesses digitizing, but government is digitizing too. So when you digitize tax filing, right, what that means is you require digitalization of payroll as well, because payroll is one of the main things that feeds the tax the tax processes. And so there's been a wave of requirements for automation in these countries, and these countries are not well served by the international vendors. They don't understand the rules, they don't understand the pricing, they don't understand the culture, and at the same time, the technologies that are available in emerging markets are the same technologies that are available elsewhere. So AWS and Microsoft and Google and so on, they have data centers in these countries. For instance, in Kenya, there are several data centers from all those different vendors. Same in Ghana, same in Nigeria, same in Rwanda, and so there are also smart people there that many have been trained as programmers, often working with those bigger companies. So there's great talent, there's great programming talent, and there's an equalization of technology opportunity. So we believe that this creates opportunity for companies to emerge
Thomas,
in those local markets and be local champions.
this is where the bigger vendors, software vendors, still are a little arrogant. I have to keep reminding them that they haven't done much globally, but the mobile phone companies and the hyperscalers have actually made all these emerging markets, they put them on equal setting as most of the West, and next generation solutions are going to come from those countries.
Yeah, it's our belief that there will be there will be an HR tech unicorn in coming out of Africa, and we'd like to think we picked it. But we're super impressed with the guys at WorkPay. And the other things they're doing is that things that take ages for international payroll vendors to sort of figure out is you've got the partnerships with the banks. So there's this seamless integration between payroll and your current account and your personal finances. So it's not only is it a good sort of employer play, but it's also a sense of improving financial access and leveling the payroll field in terms of access to fair credit, to access to all kinds of financial services that are provided on the back of the quality of the payroll data and the reliability of the payroll. So it reduces fraud. It's really has quite an inclusion and social dimension to payroll, which I've not really initially thought about, but it's actually a very significant component of payroll in emerging markets. So that's just
Thomas,
one
let me add one other thing. I'm a pretty simple guy. You guys have lots of fancy books behind you. I don't have any, so I'm very simple. Which is, if you think about the U.S. market and HR payroll, this market, right? You've got ADP, you've got Paychex, you've got a dozen odd vendors that are valued more than $1 billion, just predominantly serving the U.S. market. The pays in Africa, it's 6 times the size of just sub-Saharan Africa is 5 to 6 times the size of the U.S. market. Yet there's not one single HR payroll vendor that's valued even close to $1 billion, right? And as Thomas said, the big guys find it complex to go to some of these emerging markets, right? They're not there, they're not present, they don't know how to get regulatory changes. And so, as Thomas said, we believe that there should be very, very large businesses in these emerging markets that don't exist today. And so this is, WorkPay, when Thomas and I met them about 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago, simplistically, when you just do the back of the envelope math, it's like, man, this is a huge opportunity. It may take a little bit longer to develop, but certainly, it could be a massive market if you just do simple math and you look at, size of market.
Yep. I mean, doing the same play we started in Mexico with Worky, and we expect that Worky will probably expand across many parts of LATAM in a similar way. We've got Brio in Southeast Asia, and then we've got Palm HR in the Middle East. So we think that theory of developing a regional powerhouse is
I'm sure you're looking at partnering, but if you look at these economies, they're also going into e-invoicing at the government level, and looking at currency markets and looking at e-commerce. So, I mean, all these markets are digitizing at a very, very rapid pace, not just, and when you look at payroll, big market, but also all the surround financial transactions, same thing.
Yeah, exactly. But often in the case in these markets, they're going to have more efficient government software than many of the Western countries have, because they won't have the legacy. They won't have they're not building on legacy systems. They're able to start from scratch. So it's a fascinating space, and I think a lot of people underestimate the ingenuity and determination of people in these markets, and we believe the opposite. We think they're going to do fabulous things. So we want to talk a bit about AI then, but does that give you a sense of our global thinking?
It does, Thomas. the other thing that I'm seeing is many of these smaller vendors in these markets are used to new ways of selling, right? They don't need huge sales forces, expensive sales forces. They're trying different channels, which is,
Yeah.
I was talking to a CEO of a US company, and I said, what are you doing in this country? What are you doing in this country? He goes, Vinnie, before we move to any country, we got to justify a $10 million investment. That's the way they think about any new market. And I go, no, you don't. You can go direct, you can sell over digital channels, right? There are different partnership models you can adopt. And hadn't even thought about it or didn't want to consider it, right? So
Yeah.
you guys are looking at a new brand of player that is used to selling digitally and so on.
Yeah.
Well,
And
it's also they're way more cost efficient, right? I mean, Brio HR that sits in, most of their development is in KL, Malaysia. And a backend developer in KL, Malaysia makes a full-time equivalent salary of about $35,000, right? That same person in Silicon Valley is making $350,000. And, are they as good as the engineer in Silicon Valley? Probably not, but are they 80% as good as the engineer in Silicon Valley? Yeah. So you're losing 20% productivity, but you're doing it at 1/10 the cost. And what you're going to see, I would predict, if you fast forward 10 years, these companies that are being developed outside of Silicon Valley are going to be way more efficient, which means they're going to be way more profitable. And we're already seeing it. I mean, there's companies sitting in Greece today that are producing, 40, 50% free cash flow margins. Just because they don't think, in the gold rush mentality in a lot of cases that they do in Silicon Valley. It's changing, but Silicon Valley companies are just built very differently from companies outside of the Valley, in my opinion, and some of these global companies where they're just they can build way more efficiently.
Yep.
Go ahead. Yeah.
You want me to switch to AI, or do you want to keep on the global, Vin?
Well, the only thing I was going to mention on global is I spent a week with Zoho recently, and they're amazing. I mean, not only do they have the cost advantage, Jason, that you talk about, but the way they've gone to market, they're in, I don't know, 20 different countries now.
Yeah.
They start off small. They send a senior executive there to reside for a little bit, and they go digital mostly, and they work very closely with local governments to say, hey, how can we get your mid-market companies more efficient and so on. So they've kind of honed how to penetrate a new country fairly well over the last few years. And they're setting an MO for Western companies to follow if you choose to. Let's go into AI.
Yeah, so I'm not going to talk about AI generally. I think everyone's heard enough about general theories of AI. So I'm going to talk about specifically how we think about it in terms of the future of work and our fund specifically. So if I look at that first point there is evidence that AI technologies are beginning to disrupt work itself. So we're seeing some jobs become extremely valuable and other jobs becoming less valuable. So we're seeing pressure on call center type jobs, and we're seeing massive salary hikes in AI jobs. And so it's likely that there are going to be significant disruptions on quite a major scale over the next few years in the makeup of what people are doing at work and what has been done by AI and what has been done by the human and what's been done by that mix of the two together. We don't know all the answers for that, right? I don't have a magical crystal ball to tell you at what point do AT&T's call centers have 60% fewer people or whatever. I don't know the numbers, what they're going to be. I don't think anyone does, but it's likely that lots of jobs are going to be disrupted in some form, in some form or other. It may be quicker in some jobs and slower in others. Projections from a few years ago were maybe too generous, but there were definitely things afoot in terms of disruption of how and where work gets done, and that's important for us to understand. And in particular, the way that AI and people collaborate. So the thing we found at the moment is most of the implementations of AI technologies are generally about taking a process that was designed for humans and you layer a bit of AI on top. What we've not really seen yet are processes that are designed to take advantage of AI and from a native state, right? We're still figuring that out. And as that emerges, it's going to get very, very interesting. So if we look at it within the context of HR technology itself, we kind of see two levels of activity with AI. The first one is, when we find, and this is, I'd say that this is what most vendors are doing today, whether they're startups or large vendors, is you're adding AI, you're augmenting your existing products with AI, right? And some companies are doing this in a very lightweight way. Others are doing it in quite a sophisticated way. But it's similar from a few years ago when people started to add mobiles or employee self-service or web on top of client server. It's interesting, but it's not completely mind-bogglingly exciting. What gets exciting is then the companies that are actually building, interesting capabilities where AI is the central driving force of that product. Right? And we've probably got 3 or 4 investments like that at the moment where these companies would not exist without the AI. And those we believe can get very exciting. The third dimension that we believe is happening at the moment, and again, there's a lot of hype about this, and it's probably overhyped, but the process of building software itself is changing. So how is software tested? How is software coded? Does AI act as a coding partner for you? Does AI write some of the code? Does AI test it better? I heard the joke the other day that it used to take me 24 hours to write a program. It used to take me 23 hours to write it and 1 hour to test it. Now it takes me 1 hour to write it and 23 hours to test it. But there's a lot going on here. And while we won't invest necessarily in these technologies ourselves, it's important to be aware of those because it will change the economics of making software.
Yep.
So it suddenly becomes a lot quicker to be able to get an MVP to market. So do you need a venture capitalist at all to get your MVP to market? Maybe not. In other cases, venture is going to be even more important. And understanding that disruption is key for us as we think about investing going forward. And the fourth point, which is important to us, is that AI will be impacts with regulations, right? And impacts with ethics, impacts with all kinds of day-to-day reality. And there will be new laws emerging around and regulations emerging around AI. But there are also existing regulations that are important. And so as organizations deploy AI, they need to be aware of the risks and the real dangers of harm that can come from AI. And not only just in terms of regulatory harm, but actually in terms of harm to the employees or their customers or their candidates in the context of recruitment. And so it's important that we are aware of how do we make more fairer and safer AI. And that's if I think about, actually I'll do this one first. If we think about HR tech, a lot of the AI capabilities that HR will use involve high risk because we're dealing with data about people. We're dealing with people's careers, we're dealing with people's health, we're dealing with people's well-being, we're dealing with do they get a job or don't they get a job. So the level of regulatory interest in HR tech is probably higher than in perhaps many other areas of AI. There's also lots of existing regulations that need to be dealt with. So we actually think that this is an interesting investment category in its own right, is that how do you actually help organizations deliver responsible AI? right? And we think that this will be an important investment category in its own, its own right. But yeah, maybe relating to that, as we look at investments in the space, we think about AI at three levels. We think about, on the one hand, it's going to impact pretty much every software vendor as a feature, right? It's going to allow you to do better navigation, have a better, more compelling front end. You'll be able to have more text dialogue with your applications. You'll be able to search better. You'll be able to have better online help because the tools create better help. But that's essentially table stakes, and pretty much everybody will be doing that. Yeah, and most of the software you see today that's labeled AI is actually really just a feature. The next stage up is a product. And so this is when you're placing significant R&D capability into AI-driven stuff. And it will involve a significant amount of your R&D capacity actually building AI. Right? So if you can build something in 3 weeks and ship it, and then it's a feature. But if it's something you're spending, months really figuring out, and something that you can eventually price, then it starts to become a product, then it starts to become meaningful. Right. But then the final category is when you're actually able to build a company on top of it. Yeah. And that's much rarer than we imagined. And we start to see examples of companies that are really going deep. And then this becomes hard to replicate and hard to copy, and they develop a moat, they develop defensibility and so on, and they develop a real expertise in a particular business problem, perhaps leveraging multiple technologies, multiple data sources, and they build something that's really sustainable as a company. But almost everything we see falls into feature or product rather than actually into company.
This kind of, Thomas, I spent most of last year interviewing different people from different perspectives on Gen AI, everything from GPUs to LLMs to use cases. Mm-hmm. One area, and this is 1 year's sample, right? The market is evolving so quickly that it may be different in 24, but I found customers ahead of vendors when it comes to imagination of use cases of generative AI, right? Mm-hmm. Seeing boards say, why aren't we, as one told me, he says, Vinnie, most use cases I hear from vendors are SG&A focused, either HR or procurement or chatbots, and why aren't we talking about cost of goods sold? Because operational efficiency is just as important, and those are very different vertically, right? And then I pushed back and I said, why not think of the whole P&L? Every line item on the P&L can use some form of automation. And he said, Betty, you're right. And I'm seeing a lot of companies looking at revenue and how to monetize operational data, right? So they're slightly different.
Yeah. Well, I saw quite an interesting example actually from the German sportswear company Adidas the other day. They'd modeled out. I'll send you a link to it. I think you might find it interesting. But they've done kind of a business canvas with an AI, like. They've taken the business canvas of Adidas and say, okay, if we take each component of the business canvas, like partnering, manufacturing, supply chain, design, whatever, what's the impact of AI on each operational capability, or each segment of the business canvas? I thought that was a really smart way of doing it. But I think we've got to be careful about getting overhyped especially around the Gen AI. I think, look, there is a lot of opportunity to do some very interesting things, but there's a lot of opportunity to create significant problems, because at the end of the day, the AI is only as good as the data that you're putting into it. Right. So for all the CEOs that are saying, oh, what can I do? I see this in HR tech, and I look at the people and say, okay, well, can we plan skills out for the next 5 years or whatever? I say, great. Tell me how many employees you have today. And it's still an amazing number of companies that actually can't even do like a coherent headcount. And those same people are expecting to wave a magic AI wand and predict the future. So I think there needs to be realism from both sides. I think great that the leadership in companies is having imagination, but they also need to also say, there's a hard graph to get the data going. And the other thing about some of these AI engines is they're a little bit like a nuclear power station, right? It's easy to get them up, but you got to keep it going. And just take the Air Canada case just that came over the weekend, right? So I don't know whether you followed that, but that wasn't a Gen AI case. It was just a previous version of chatbot technology. But Air Canada had a chatbot, right? And there was this guy whose grandmother died. So you wanted to understand what the bereavement, you can get special rates for when you go fly to a funeral, right? The bereavement service on the airline. So he typed in to the chatbot, hey, what's the rule on the bereavement thing? And they said, please submit your claim within 30 days of flying, and all will be good. Sorry for your loss and all that. So smart kid did a screen print, and kept it, so they had it. Turns out actually the policy is you need to do a claim before you go.
Right. It's
Right.
for future flights, not past dated for, yeah.
Yeah. So you apply, and then they give you a cheaper special ticket. And so the chatbot had given him the wrong advice. Right. And basically, so he then, had a whole backwards and forwards with Air Canada, and they basically, tried to squeeze him out in the small claims court, and the small claims court, kicked Air Canada out and said, if your chatbot told him that, then that's the rule. You got to do it. So, as you dig into it, what basically everyone is saying is that they basically trained it. They hadn't updated the chatbot with the latest policies. So the chatbot was still running the policy from 18 months before. So, whether that's true or not, who knows? But, Air Canada, I'd love to see the root cause analysis, but, not to blame Air Canada, but I think many companies are like this. They'll put one of these tools up, but then they don't put the governance processes in place to make sure that the model, is continually retrained on the latest rules or the latest policies or the latest data. And because these tools are so powerful.
I heard Air Canada's exposure was only one fare, and it was only $500. Can you imagine if they had offered that to everybody?
Yeah, but what have they? They've had to shut the chatbot down while they figure this out.
Yeah.
So and again, you think about that, and this is not Gen AI. It was pre-Gen AI. It was in November 20. It was November 22 that the case started. But the point is simple: is that the point I'm trying to make in a long-winded way around is that your AI is only being as good as the data that it's trained on, and the data governance that you put in place to keep it maintained. Which for us as investors is interesting, because the tooling and the services around that become a very interesting investment category in their own right.
Jason, you've been quite through the discussion.
Well, I was going to say, let me layer one other thought on this. There was a report that came out, ironically, from one of our portfolio companies today, that 60% of the outputs from OpenAI include some form of plagiarism. Like, that's shocking. Maybe it's not necessarily shocking, but that's disconcerting, right? That the tool that many are using today to have heavy reliance on some form of quality output has a lot of bad data, to say the least, but some plagiarism involved into it. Like, this is a should be a big issue that we're all thinking about. And what it shows is there's just some lack of AI governance, and that's not a bad thing, right? This is relatively new. I mean, OpenAI has only been in market for 15 months, but what it does show is that it's a little bit of Wild West, that we need to start to establish some rules of the road, and people are trying, right? Biden put out his executive order at the end of last year. The UK put together their summit, ironically timed, similar, in tandem with the executive order. So people are talking about it, and it'll happen. But I think we do need some emerging rules of the road that start to take shape here sooner rather than later.
I'm hearing
further along on the rules. Yeah.
Jason, on the OpenAI thing, I'm hearing both sides of the issue. The New York Times number of tokens that were in ChatGPT 3 were 0.1% of the total number of tokens. So OpenAI is saying, come on, New York Times, you're important, but not that important. And New York Times is saying, well, we are very influential. More people use, want our data compared to every other token. So there's a little bit of that. I've talked to several corporate executives who say, Vinnie, our data is like oil. People are trying to steal it. And we're going to be much more careful about sharing our data with vendors, right? So I think
Yeah.
we're going through that phase. It won't settle for a couple of years.
Yeah, there's a lot
That's right.
to figure out. There's a lot to figure out. And you know, I'm not like a blunt tech optimist. You know, I do see the dark side of these, you know, these technologies, and I want to make sure that, you know, as we invest, that we're investing responsibly and investing in companies that are thinking responsibly about AI. We feel that that's an important part of what we do. Is, you know, it's not just a Wild West. We've got to be building. We've got to be building products. You know, we've got to be products safely and products that don't, that, you know, work hard to remove bias and work hard to be fair. You know, and we think that's an important part of AI. And so I'm a fan of elements of AI regulation. I think we need it.
You know,
Hey, then
the one negative I see with AI is there's so much attention going there. I have to remind vendors, we didn't finish the whole transaction processing cycle. There's a lot of code still to be written.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
I look to the past to give some sort of indication of the future, and I think there's a lot of similarity in what's going to play out with AI that what happened with SaaS.
Yeah.
You know, there was a decade of I don't want to call it the Wild West. I don't think it was the Wild West, but SaaS was kind of an emerging technology, and every vendor was doing it a little bit differently. And you know, we really didn't have any sort of governance or data privacy. Everyone was kind of doing it uniquely. And then something meaningful happened, you know, halfway through the 20-year journey of SaaS. In kind of year 10, something emerged called SOC 2. And SOC 2 kind of set the rules of the road around data privacy, how, you know, all of the things that are very, very important in the SaaS world today. But it took kind of 10 years to get there. And now you can't really sell enterprise software unless you're SOC 2 compliant. And I think something will eventually emerge in the AI world as well. Is it's going to take a while of iteration and trial and failure and big flame outs and, you know, showing up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. But eventually we'll get to a point where there's some sort of industry standards, regulation, whatever you want to call it, that will drive the industry forward. And what we saw kind of in 2010 when SOC 2 came into place is the SaaS world took off, right? I mean, not just the big guys, but, you know, niche vendors, vendors like Cornerstone and Coupa and, you know, you name them. And, you know, I think there's a, you know,
Yep.
I think there's a potential that some standards will be set around AI, and that will drive the industry forward. And we'll really see an acceleration of AI when that happens.
Yeah.
And Jason, we haven't even factored in governments coming in and talking about carbon and data domicile issues and so on. So yeah, all that will need to be worked out again.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, guys, this is excellent. Thank you for the update. Any final thoughts?
You know, just it's so cool to see you, Vinnie, and just talk to you. Like, you know, it just seems like we talk every now and again, and it's been, you know, I've known you probably for 20 years, probably, I would think by now.
And we haven't killed each other.
No, we disagree on a lot of things, but I think we agree on a lot of things too. So
there's an
safer.
ocean that prevents that from happening.
Yeah, but keep the big guys, those big vendors honest, keeping their feet to the flame.
Hey, we need to keep the analysts honest. That's one of my bugaboos is what the big analyst firms are not doing to keep the big vendors honest. So, but that's
I'll leave that one to you. I'll leave that battle to you, Vinnie. No, but
thank you, guys.
yeah, it was great talking again. Thanks.
Good to see you, Vin.